Hey, Jerry, nice to see you again. Welcome to the show.
Miss Sherry, good to see you as well. I gotta admit, I was getting a little jittery getting on here because you put a lot of pressure delivering so good on my show recently. So I'm uh I'm under the gun, I'll say that much.
It's funny that you say that, and I don't know what it is. Like the moment we met, there was like this instant connection. I don't know. I feel like I'm almost looking at a reflection of myself, and then the conversation was so organic. Like it was as if we've known each other forever. And now I'm so excited you're on my show because now I get to pick your brain. And then the other thing too, I'm reading your bio. I'm like, oh my God, like, is this my life? Because it's so nuts. And you've really reinvented your identity. You've gone through not one major life event, but many major life events, and especially closing down a business, which I can relate to because I also had a gym that I had to close down during the pandemic, and that was one of the most painful things ever, and for many reasons which I know we'll get into later. But just to see this the constant just breaking down and then just really building yourself back up and breaking down and building yourself back up, I can't tell you how inspiring that is for me, and I'm sure for most people who will be listening today. So Jerry, thank you again for being here today.
I so much appreciate it. And I didn't realize that you had a gym that you closed down. I don't think we got into that on the
Yeah.
show, but spirit animals, I guess.
Yeah, seems like it. So, as we dive in, maybe you can just share a little bit around what you do and what your jam is, and just give people a little bit more of a background around who you are.
So currently what I have, I guess I'll start where I've evolved into, and then we can go back into the story and then how I got here. We'll start forward and go back.
Love it.
So what I've evolved into is I'm really diving a lot into self-confidence, self-esteem, self-respect, all those self things that we have a hard time with as a culture today, because I have recognized, because of the rebirth, I guess, that I've had over the last 12 months, I've recognized that that was a big part of what was holding me back. I recognized that a while ago. To be honest with you, I just didn't do as much deep thinking about it as I have over the last 12 months. Self-confidence and self-esteem, especially, I have dug a lot into over the last 12 months, what it means, kind of where it comes from, um, how you how you carry that forward from adolescence, which is where a lot of mine comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I had a lot of that in adolescence, and I felt that over the last, over my adulthood, if you will. And I've thought about that again a little bit, but just the level of thinking and studying I've done into self-confidence and self-esteem, especially recently, has just got me thinking a lot about it. And it's got me digging a lot into my own self-confidence, self-esteem, which is ironic because a lot of people look at me and they go, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that I'm like this super fit, like hulky guy by any stretch, but people look at me and I'm not, I'm a fitter person that walks around. So they're like, how can you be lacking self-esteem and self-confidence? And I think people who knew me as an adolescent, they would say the same thing because I was a natural athlete and so on and so forth. And it's like, how could you not have self-confidence? But I think we all, I think it all hits us in different ways. And I think I was just, because I was trying to protect myself so much, that I just overlooked it. I just, I was, we're all trying to protect ourselves to some degree. The question is, how are we doing it?
Yeah, so good. I love that you bring this up for two reasons. Because, first of all, what I notice is generally the big block that keeps anyone from achieving any goal is confidence, right? Is self worth, is really belief in self. And then the other thing that you pointed out, which is so important, is you're right. Someone like you, and I've seen you on Instagram and I see you and follow your stuff. And I'm like, he's a fit dude, man. Like, he's doing a lot of cool things. And then to hear that you also would struggle with self confidence, I think is so grounding because I have that same issue. And I always get the same comments like, oh, look at you, and you just bounce right back, and all these things happen to you, and there are never any issues. And really, deep on the inside, I have massive feelings of unworthiness at times and not enoughness. And so let's come back to that and more curious around why that's important, Jerry, and how does that again lead you into this transition that you've now created in your life?
So, like you, I believe that the thing that really holds us back is our lack of self-confidence.
Mm.
When you're trying to pursue something, it's either your lack of self-confidence or your belief in just what's possible in the world, and kind of those are the same thing to some degree. But if you
Mm.
don't have the belief that you can do it, if you don't believe in your capabilities to do it, then there's a good chance that you're going to sabotage yourself along the way. Sabotage, self-sabotage comes in so many different flavors, if you will. It can come in a simple flavor of a change in schedule, and then you justify quitting something because of the change in schedule. I'm
Mm.
sure you've seen this. I see the more the how many times I saw someone quit because the soccer schedule all of a sudden came in and the kids had to be ran around in soccer. How many times somebody quit because of that is I can't count, because again, that's just one flavor of self-sabotage. It feels right. It
Mhm.
feels like a justification.
Right.
And it is a change. Don't get me wrong. I'm not telling you, I'm not brushing that aside, that that's something to be worked through. But
Mhm.
your justification for it is that it throws your life off and it changes everything and you can't figure it out. But probably, not always, but probably the underlying thing is really the confidence to actually follow through with your actions, the confidence to actually achieve the goal that you're after. And that's what is so hard to miss, because we unknowingly look through ourselves and look to the outside world for reasons why we don't accomplish our things.
Right.
Because again, we want to protect ourselves constantly, is what we're trying to do. We're constantly trying to protect ourself, aka our ego, which are the same thing. So we do that by pointing at things outside of us as to why our lives aren't the way they are and why we can't achieve what we want to achieve. Looking at the business that I just shut down last year, which I was in for 10 years, I could
Mm-mm.
justify a million reasons why it didn't do better than what it did. It was open for 10 years. That's a long time. That most people would say, hey, that's great. That's success. You're successful. But in my eyes, they could have been a lot better. And I could justify a million reasons. It's because of this, it's because of that, it's because of this, that, and the other thing. But when I came down to it and I looked at myself, there were a lot of roadblocks I put up for myself. And I heard a lot that the main roadblock in a business is the owner. And I didn't really understand that until the last 12 months. I didn't really get that saying until the last 12 months. So there were a lot of roadblocks I put up for myself over those 10 years. And until you reflect on it, you just don't see it.
Oh my gosh, so powerful what you just said. And it is so true that unconsciously we take actions throughout our day to support whatever our self image is. So if my self image is, I can't do this, I'm not going to be good at that, I'm going to suck, everyone's going to judge me, no one's going to like me, no one's going to sign up for my stuff, no one's going to whatever, then I'm correct. And that's what I see. And so if at any point I feel like I'm moving out of that self image, I'm breaking free from my comfort zone, as they call it, I will immediately pull myself back in some way. And that looks like the self sabotage. And it's interesting also what you say, because when we tend to blame any outside force for us not committing to ourselves, it actually removes that shame and guilt and blame on ourselves, right? It's not my fault. It's not my problem. Suddenly things change and schedule change and all of a sudden I can't help it, and husband brought chips into the house and all these other reasons. It's not me, right? I'm not making that choice. But what we're also doing is disarming ourselves from being able to make any change. And so the moment that we take on that responsibility and we say, hey, you know, it's my fault. It's my fault I did this. It's my fault that I didn't readjust my schedule. And I want to just invite this because I understand and I agree just kind of what you were saying, Jerry, that yes, sometimes things do change and it's outside of our control. But the one question that I'll always kind of bring up as a challenge to the no time, or it's not my fault because I can't, it's not possible, is what do you make time for then? Because many of us can sit in front of Netflix for 2 or 3 hours every evening. Or when suddenly our kid needs us, or our parent needs us, or someone needs us, all of a sudden we make time for that. Or our boss asks us to work longer. All of a sudden we can make time for that. So we can make time for all these things. So clearly it's not a time thing. It really is a self-reflection thing, and it's a self-confidence thing. I love that so much. So powerful.
So I want to go back to yes, I 100% agree. I want to go back to the breaking trust with yourself.
That's good.
When you blame other things, when subconsciously you know that you have control over it, that you could have done something different or you could have done something about it. When you do that, what you're doing is deteriorating your reputation with yourself, is the way that I like to think about it.
Oof. Hmm.
Your reputation with yourself. And most people don't think about that because we're actually told in society today that we shouldn't think highly of ourselves. We shouldn't show highly of ourselves.
Yes.
We shouldn't blah, 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 blah. Whatever else you shouldn't do to show that you're proud of who you are.
Mm.
So to think that you should have a high reputation of yourself is kind of a weird thing. But whenever literally you know that there's something you could have done differently in a situation, there's some change that you could have made in a situation, and yet you point at an external circumstance and you look at that and you go, it's that thing's fault. What you're essentially telling yourself and telling your internal, your subconscious, is that you're not worthy and
Right.
you're not capable of doing it. Self-esteem and self-respect are those two things. Your self-esteem, your self-confidence, you're not capable of doing it, and you're not worthy. Your self-respect, you're not worthy of it.
Hmm.
So I just think that it seems like such a small thing to people to blame something outside of you. It's such a small little, oh, it's this thing's fault. It's that person's fault.
Hmm.
But when those things add up, and they do add up for so many people, they add up very quick. They add up really hard for your self-conscious, your subconscious. When they add up, it's hard to start to dig that hole out. You can do it, and it's definitely worth the effort and the time, but it's hard to start to dig out of that hole.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's daily work, right? Because to your point, it's very easy to criticize myself. Like it's very easy. Like you're such an idiot, you're such a loser. Like what's wrong with you? Like right? And I could just go on and on. And that's you're right. It is definitely accepted. But if I'm like I'm a badass, I'm gorgeous, I'm amazing, and all these things, now I'm conceited. Right now I'm full of myself, and that is frowned upon. So no, that's why we don't give ourselves compliments because it looks like we have a big ego, and that's not okay. But putting ourselves down, that's okay. And it's interesting because I hear the struggle so often too with the women that I work with, feeling really bad and guilt and shame, even saying something nice about themselves. But I don't want to have an ego. I don't want anyone to think that I'm so full of myself. Well, let's create a balance here because when we enter this world, we are constantly interacting with our external environment. So that's very, very easy. We spend so much time interacting with people and things, and that's where our main focus is the moment we open our eyes in the morning. But we never actually sit down with ourselves to really reflect on what our internal environment is, our emotions, our thoughts, our self-concept even, and really just let that kind of subconsciously be created from the things that we hear from other people, from the things that were said to us, from the lessons that we had in our lives, from the different fails that allowed us to have those lessons. And so here we are creating the self-concept and just running it every single day on autopilot, that's the subconscious mind, and not really taking any time to really examine where did those beliefs come from? Why is it okay that I sit there all day and criticize myself, but it's so hard to love myself? Why is that? But if we actually take time, and that's the effort part in my opinion, just like it's effort to carve out time to train, it's effort to carve out time to prepare food for ourselves that will serve us. It's also effort to sit down with ourselves and really focus on how we can start to switch that narrative in the mind so that we are using more empowering words and we're so in full acceptance of who we are with so much self-love and grace and compassion.
There's two things I want to hit on there on
Mm,
what you said. Number one, not only thinking about yourself more positively, but think about when someone compliments you. What do most people
yes.
do when someone compliments you?
Deflect.
Oh, I'm not. What are you talking about? It's no
Yeah.
big deal. No big deal. You either
Right.
brush it off or
Yes.
you immediately throw them a compliment right back,
Right.
is what most people do, which again, you're essentially blocking the compliment and throwing it away. You're not
Mm.
allowing it to sink in. You're not allowing it to become you. And it's actually super ironic that you say this today because I got a video from a young guy, a young man that I interviewed on the podcast because we just happened to run into each other and I listened to his story and I liked his story and I'm like, yeah, I want you on the podcast. And he was shy and you could tell he wasn't very comfortable on the show. And once we got finished with the show, I'm like, hey, I can tell here's what was missing. And we kind of had a little conversation. So he sent me a video today. He's like, this was maybe 6 weeks ago we did the podcast. He's like, I just want you to know I still think about that conversation. I can tell in my content how much it's impacted my confidence and so on and so forth. And when I sent a video back to respond, the first thing that I did was just go into content. Oh, yeah,
Mm.
I can tell it's much different. And I stopped and I deleted the video. And I'm like, no, I got to respect that he said something
Yes.
about me and that he thanked me and that he acknowledged that I helped him. So
Wow.
I erased the video, started over, and said, Emmanuel, thank you for saying that. I'm getting chills right now, by the way. I
Yeah.
appreciate you
Same.
saying that. I appreciate you acknowledging how I helped you.
Right.
And then I went into, and I can also tell that it's
Yes.
helpful. So I think that people just they feel like it's just necessary to brush off compliments. They think it's necessary, and they think it's necessary to give a compliment back whenever a compliment is given. So that's the first thing. And the first thing to think about when someone compliments you, as long as it is a real compliment, it is worth having it. It is worth taking it,
Mm.
especially if it's true. If it's not true, which I don't know why someone would be complimenting you if it's not true, but I'm sure it happens, then you kind of go, all right, thanks. I don't know what you do in that instance. But if someone's complimenting you, take it. The
Right.
second part, day to day. I think about this in 24-hour blocks. I think about life in 24-hour blocks
Mm.
because it's easy to think about life in life, right? When you think about achieving a goal, losing 20 pounds, for instance, or releasing 20 pounds, as you would say, which I noticed in our interview that you kept
Yep.
saying that. Oh, I like that. But losing 20 pounds, for instance, it's a big goal. And if you haven't done it before, it feels like a lot. So instead of focusing on that 20 pounds, which can feel overwhelming, and if things start going slow, then you can convince yourself to quit. Just think about doing your best in the 24-hour block that
So
you
good.
have.
Mm.
I have this time frame to work with. And if I check these things off the list, there's a good chance if I do that today and then I do it tomorrow and then I do it the next day that I'll get to that 20 pounds. The
Mm.
20 pounds is there and hopefully I get to it and I'm going to keep it as my goal. But my outcomes today are the most important. My processes today, the
Mm.
actions for today. I need to check those things off the list as best I can, put effort into those things as best as I can. And that's what will allow me to get to that 20 pounds.
Wow, so good. I love that. I love that. And there's this massive energy that happens when we receive a compliment. We receive it. We open ourselves up to accept it. And if we actually look back at, let's say, the last 10 years only, I mean, I'm in my 40s, so that's going to be a long, long history to look back at if I want to do the whole lifespan. But in the last 10 years, if I think about it, I'll remember most of the negative compliments or the negative things that happen and absolutely disregard all the positive things, all the nice things, all right. So when we get, let's say, feedback from customers or feedback from friends, again, we tend to focus on the things that are uncomfortable for us. And that's what we actually tend to implant in our mind and then run through our mind over and over and over again. And yet we never give enough value and energy to the beautiful things that were said, which is the truth about us. And to your point, why would someone say that to us if it wasn't true? Right? And even if it wasn't, well, thank you received anyways.
I love that. That's so good. But it's negativity bias at its best,
Yeah,
is what it is.
right.
I think if you understand that humans have a tendency to be attracted to things that are negative, then you can put barriers up to fight against that. A perfect
Mm,
example of that is driving by an accident. When you drive by an accident, what do? Most people look to see what's going on. Even if even if you see cars just thrown about everywhere and you know it's maybe going to be pretty bad, you still look. So human beings just have a tendency to move toward or to, I don't want to say seek out, but they pay attention to the negative. And that's a biological, that's an evolutionary thing that's been built into us because years ago, we had lions, tigers, and bears to be worried about. And so if we didn't pay attention to the negative, if you will, the rustling in the bushes or something overhead or something behind us, if we didn't pay attention to it, then there's a good chance that things didn't work out well for us.
right,
Today, we don't have lions and tigers and bears. We have other people to deal with, and we
right,
have external circumstances, and we have things in the future to worry about. That's what we have. So we have to put up barriers and guardrails to pay attention to keep us from dragging ourselves toward that negative stuff.
Right.
and to recognize when the positive is given to us and whenever we do something positive as well.
Yes. Yeah, so good. So good. And that's really the importance of celebrating our wins and really just giving space and attention to all those amazing things that we create in our lives and that we bring into our lives. And along those lines, I actually want to come back a little bit to your story and again talk about these major life events because from what I understand you went through a divorce. It was a long relationship, and I think something around the similar time you also closed down your business. And so I mean for many people this is hard to come back from. And so I want to just hold space a little bit for you in that moment, and I'm curious around how your mindset was during that time. And I'm sure there was a lot of dark moments, or maybe there wasn't. I'm super curious. Like, how do you reshift and recreate your identity with so much enthusiasm when most people would have taken years and years and years to overcome all of these life events that for you have happened in a very short duration of time?
So my business and my marriage started in the same year and they ended in the same year.
Wow.
Not on purpose. It just happened that way. 2013 in June, sorry, in July, I got married. In August, I opened the business.
Wow.
And then last year, got separated in June, and then closed the business in November. The official divorce didn't happen until, I believe, December or so. So it was a very short time frame that I closed the business and got divorced. Both of them were 10 years long. So a decade, it's not a short period of time for either one of those things, as you can imagine. A
Mm-hmm.
lot put into both of them and a lot learned from both of them.
Right.
So whenever you go through those things, it feels like things are out of control.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what a lot of people focus on is all the things that are out of control, all the things that are out of your hands. The business closing down. Oh, I feel like I can't do anything. I feel like I can't succeed. And now I got this money thing going on, and then this relationship thing going on, and the community's leaving, and I'm not going to be around them anymore. And with the divorce going on, now I got to do this paperwork, and we got this going on. And oh, by the way, I'm going to be single now, and so on and so forth. So it feels like stuff's just in the air, and people focus on that, the things that they can't control. And in the beginning, there was a lot of that going on. What's the things I can't control? I got to do this. I got to do that. I got to do this. And oh my gosh. And when I was by myself, it was not good because that's what was spinning. After a month or so, I sat myself down and I'm like, okay, if I let this go, I'm going to go crazy. So I have to figure out how to get this under control. So I asked myself, what can I control? What can I control? And the
Mm.
things I can control, which we've already kind of talked about, the process is what I can control. I can control what I do in a day's time. Most of it revolved around improving myself, to be honest. It
Mm-hmm.
was personal development or physical development. I actually increased the amount of physical activity I did during that time because I knew I could control it. Because I knew that it was something that I could control and it was something that gave me clarity. What do most people do when it's been a long day? Or
Right.
what does your spouse say? Oh, go blow off some steam, go work out.
Right.
That's what we say. So what did I do? I added movement in my day purposefully more often. I already weight trained 5 days a week, first thing in the morning. So I added a walk in the middle of the day, just a short 30 or 40-minute walk. And then I added an hour-long hike at the end of the day out in
Wow.
nature.
Right.
Again, that was on purpose because when you're in nature, well, I'm not going to go into all that, but nature tends to have a calming effect.
Yes.
So yes, most definitely. So I figured out the things that I could control, and then I increased the things that I could control because then it gave me a sense of calmness more often, not always, because trust, because still there's tons that I can't control. There's crazy stuff going on. My life is completely changing. I'm 39 years old, and literally I'm building a wall from the previous 10 years of my life, and I have to turn and walk the other way. That's
Mm.
literally what's happening. So when I focused on the things I could control and I increased the level of things that I could control, it brought more calmness and clarity, if you will, to my life. And that was really the thing that got me through it.
Wow.
So much mental going on, but that that piece of it, without that, I can only imagine how much it would have fell apart.
Wow. Wow. This whole time you're sharing, I just want to say, Jerry, I have goosebumps, and you made me so incredibly emotional because there's so much strength behind your words. And there's this wisdom, or there's this whisper clearly that you got to really start focusing on the solutions versus the problems that you are currently facing, which is very, very hard to get to, especially when you're going through all these things. I mean, there's financial stuff going on, and there's relationship stuff going on, and there's life stuff going on. I mean, this is our health. Like, these are our greatest problems in life, is really everything that you've just described. And yet you're still able to hold that mindset and that sharpness around really focusing on the things that you can control, when again most people at that time would really throw in the towel. Look, I'm going to stop exercising, too much is going on. I'm going to stop taking care of myself, too much is going on, and I'm going to stop doing all these things, and maybe even picking up non-serving habits. And as you're talking too, one of the reasons why I was getting emotional is because when the pandemic happened and I was forced to close down my gym, I tried to save it, obviously, like many people. Unfortunately, I lived in a province where I'd had no control over how to run my business and operate it, and there was a lot of mandates. But I remember after everything was said and done, I had this moment of like, who am I? Like, who am I? Right? Because I was always sharing CrossFit. In fact, my car was plastered with that. So everywhere I went, like everyone knew where I was, everyone knew my car, I dressed that way every single day. I was at the gym every single day. And all of a sudden it was like, okay, so who am I now? Because I was so in resonance with that identity. That's always how I saw myself for the last 10 years. Also, I had my gym for 10 years, ironically. It's so crazy, all these parallels. My goodness, right? So I'm just curious for you, especially, again, it's this 10-year period where in that 10-year period, and I think this is like in your 30s. So this is really the part of life where we're growing, we're really just sitting into who we are. And so you have a marriage with this person, and you also have a gym where you show up every single day. And so for 10 years, like this is your life, like this is who you are. And so then what? So even if we do focus on the things that we can control, how do we reset then that self-concept and be able to accept something new and even get excited about it? So can you share that part of the journey?
Yes. So this is something that I didn't expect, or that I didn't, yeah, that I didn't expect. Once once the gym was officially closed, I closed it on Thanksgiving Day. That was our last class. We did a Thanksgiving morning class, and that was it. That was the last class. It was emotional. We had 20, 25 people there. Everyone had a great time. We gathered around at the end, sat and talked. I thanked everybody, all that stuff. It was emotional. It was a tough ending. So I expected all that. Closed it down. Things went on for a couple of weeks. It was about a month after that. That's when you recognize that this is what's happening. A couple of weeks, it's like, okay, it's only been a couple of weeks. You get about a month in, you're like, oh, okay, this is the way things are. What I didn't expect was the attachment that myself had on being important at the gym, meaning our gym was very community based, as most CrossFit gyms are. So I'm sure you had a lot of this as well.
Mm-hmm.
Our gym was very community based. We did things outside of the gym. We would go and do community things, that kind of thing. Also, where the gym was, it's a small community. There's only 12,000 people in the town. So, people knew me in the town. I'd go up to the coffee shop. Everybody knew me at the coffee shop. Suddenly, that was all taken away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't expect that feeling of being important in that realm, in that area. When that was gone, I didn't expect myself, my ego, to be hit the way that it was. So that was an additional awakening, if you will, that I had to go through to go to do work and say, why am I attached to needing to be accepted by people, needing to feel accepted by a group? Everyone wants to be accepted by a group. Of course, that's part of, again, human nature. They want to feel accepted. But it's different when you feel like that is your identity.
Right.
That is who you are. So that was another part of the work that I had to do. So when it comes to actually breaking everything down and working through the confidence, the being attached to the community and all of that, that was something that was, again, it was a daily process.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I gave myself permission to do was when I felt that urge coming on of not feeling sad and depressed, but like overwhelmed about what was going on, I gave myself permission to feel it for a little bit, right?
Hmm.
To just feel it, not to try and push it aside and like really sink
Mm-hmm.
it down, which is what I would usually do in the past. But I gave myself permission to feel it. And then once I gave myself some time to feel it, and I tried to keep it short. Again, it wasn't days or weeks. It was, I would give myself whatever, 30 minutes, an hour to feel it. And then I'd ask myself, why do I feel this way? Why is it here? What is it inside of me that's actually causing this feeling to come on? That's where that work of self-confidence was lacking, and self-respect was lacking, and attachment to being important, my ego being attached to being important, was there. That's where those kind of things really came in, when I gave myself permission to have enough time to feel the feeling and then ask the question, where is this coming from? Why is this here? Why is it, what am I supposed to do with this?
Right.
Instead of letting it control me, instead
Mm-hmm.
of the feeling coming on and me going, oh, this is the way things are, I feel so bad, I'm so, and then diving and spiraling into the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people will do that,
Right.
let that spiral start to come down and not catch themselves and recognize that it's happening, and then figure out what they can do with that energy instead.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where a lot of that work came from, was when that would come on, was not pushing that down, not trying to push it and just brush it under the rug, but also not letting it stop me and control me, and then asking what I'm supposed to do with it. Where is this coming from? Why is this here? What inside of me is causing this to hang around?
Right. Yeah. So good. And what a massive, massive display of strength that is. And I'm going to come back to this word because it's actually, we feel sitting in our emotion, even allowing ourselves to cry, let's say, is such a massive act of weakness, right? Like, why am I crying? I'm going to push this back down. Like, I don't want to feel this, right? But actually allowing yourself to feel it and allowing that energy to move through you is how we process it and is how we actually overcome it. Otherwise, it's always there. And if we continue to just suppress that every time it comes up and not want to deal with it, then we start ending up needing other coping mechanisms. And then it just, again, is this constant pain point that keeps on growing over time. Don't even talk about the gym. Don't even talk about don't even say that person's name, right? And it just becomes this big thing. And you know, as you're talking, I'm thinking about the 6 human needs. Tony Robbins talks about this a lot, right? The need for significance. And I know you know all this stuff. And so that's what it is. It's not that, oh, I need to be important when I walk into the gym. And very, I think similar. I'm going to share this with you. I don't think I've actually shared this on the podcast, but you know, when you open a gym, it's really a massive act of love. Like it is pure love and passion. We don't open a gym to make a gazillion, million dollars. It's really like, I just want to serve people and I want to help people. And similar to you, this gym that I built over 10 years of my life, but even before that, I was doing private training and I was doing group things in the park. And it's like this whole journey of my life to open up this gym. And I don't know that people are unaware that as a gym owner, you're really there to serve. Like, it's really not about the profit. It's people over profit. And so 7 days a week I was there. I remember the CrossFit Opens. I would take time away from my kids who were really young to go judge people like nothing. There's no return or exchange of money. I'm doing it for pure love because I'm there to support you and cheer you on. I'm there again during events that take place outside the gym. This is also my social environment. All of a sudden, all this is taken away. And there's this part of you that's like, wow, you just spent the last 10 years like giving and giving and giving. And then this is what happens. And so I have to say that I think a part of that pain is just that sudden lack, that sudden feeling that there is no appreciation. Nobody is seeing me. Nobody is acknowledging what I've just done the last 10 years. And I've done everything. I've poured in money in there. I've poured in my life in there. I've poured in time in there. There were moments where really like I made decisions where I chose the gym over my family regularly. And I did this for years. And then all of a sudden it closed and boom, and it was over. And it was like, whoa, like what just happened? Right? And so it's almost like the rug is swept under your feet. And the way that I actually had to get over it and really accept it was doing exactly what you did, allowing all the emotions and just sitting in it and sitting it and trying to understand like what else is behind that. But the other thing too was I needed to redefine what success was. Because success wasn't that the gym is still open. The success isn't that I, made X number of dollars and oh my goodness, and this was, the greatest thing I've ever done. Success was that I implanted the seed of fitness into the lives of so many people. I've introduced CrossFit to so many people that never knew what it was and didn't even think that they'd be able to participate. And they're still doing that today. And that's all I've ever wanted in my business, is not to always have clients that stay with me until, the rest of their lives, but really for them to be autonomous. And now when I look back, I'm like, wow, those 10 years, and I see all the people that came into my gym, they're still training, they're going to other gyms, they've started other sports, some of them start triathlons, some of them done marathons. That's amazing. That's all I've ever wanted. And that made me feel like my time, my effort, my energy was needed. And that was what it's all about. And then of course, after all was said and done, I had the opportunity to launch my podcast, to go online, and I've built out so many programs online, and my life looks very different. And it's so clear that I couldn't be doing what I'm doing now if all of that hadn't happened. And I'm in acceptance now. Of course, when you're going through it, Jerry, that's not what you're thinking, right? No. But after the fact, that's when you're like, oh yeah, of course. And so, no, I would never go back. I wouldn't try to redo anything. I don't regret anything. I see now that this is the natural flow of life, and this is just how it unfolded. But what's so interesting is that life for every single human being on the planet contains suffering. And if you feel like you got, the wrong end of the stick and things always happen to me and everyone else is so lucky and poor me and all this, I really will ask you to go and question people's lives and journeys. Because if you really ever learn a person's story, it's impossible not to fall in love with them. And we all have a story. We all suffer in different ways. And that is part of the balance.
Well, and the irony is that it's really the people who suffer the least who have the most internal mental suffering. Not always, not all the time, but I feel like it's not unusual for someone who has had a comfortable life most of the time, which, to be totally honest, I had up until all this craziness, but my life wasn't all that hard growing up as an adolescent. We lived in an upper middle class house, upper middle class family. It was all good. Again, I was a decent athlete. Everything was fine. Didn't have to work too hard at sports to be good. Didn't have to work too hard at school to be good enough to get through. So like I didn't have all that much suffering, if you will, that I had to go through. And so that actually played a big part in my lack of confidence in other things that were going on. But that's what also happens in so many other instances, that when you don't, and I'm not saying that I would ever wish suffering on somebody, and yet when you look at a lot of the people who have quote unquote success, what we would deem success in the world, a lot of them have gone through some level of intense suffering, whether that's overcoming an addiction, whether that's going through jail and coming out of jail and overcoming that, whether that's their parents being abusive, whether that's their parents being addicts to some level and them seeing that and not being that way, whether that's being an immigrant and having to start from the bottom. That's what a lot of those people, again, not most of them, but a lot of those people have some level of real deep suffering that they had to go through to get where they were. So they basically build in these mechanisms to overcome, these resilience mechanisms, if you will, to overcome, to beat the odds, to confront the obstacle, to have courage, to have confidence. And those things just, that it was there by necessity. It's not something that they had to force themselves to go through, which a lot of people have to do now. Like, you have to force yourself to be uncomfortable. You have to force yourself, because if you just sit in your house, you could just sit in your house all day long. You could order food, like you can get everything brought to you. So unless you force yourself outside of your comfort zone, literally, and you go and exercise and go outside in the cold sometimes and go take a cold shower sometimes and go in the heat and do these things that make you uncomfortable, then yeah, it's going to feel like you're internally suffering because actually, I would argue because you haven't done any suffering, so you don't really know what real suffering feels like.
Mm. Whoa, mic drop there, my friend. Oh my gosh, that was so good. So good. And as you're talking, what I'm thinking is, well, self confidence can only come from you really needing to overcome something big. Like, how else? Like, right? I just proved something to myself. I went through this big effort and it was hard and it was scary. And so, really, what we're saying here and what I'm hearing you say, Jerry, is you need to have something scary first. So, first, it has to be uncomfortable. There has to be something scary that's presented to you, where now you need to harness courage. So, you need to become courageous to go through that. You need to be brave. And on the other side of that, once you do go through that and you overcome that, that's where you harness the self confidence. So here we are thinking, I need to have self confidence to get started. Like, I just need to work on myself to be confident and motivated to get started. But that's not how it works. It's actually the inverse. We have to be presented with something scary and uncomfortable to actually take action, even though it's scary as hell. We're doing it. And through that process, through bravery and through taking action, even though there's fear present, that's how we can create that confidence and really understand what we're actually capable of doing.
Yeah, it's literally doing it on purpose because like I
Mm.
said, in our society today, you can't it's just not likely unless you go do something like go get yourself thrown in jail or something like that, or you become a drug addict, which hopefully most people don't choose to do so that they can come out on the other side of it better. So I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is pushing yourself to be uncomfortable. Exercise is a basic example, but here's another thing to think about. There's a guy named Michael Easter who's written a couple of great books, one called The Comfort Crisis, in which in that book he suggests doing something once a quarter that is so challenging to you that the only rule is that you shouldn't have a likelihood of dying. Outside of that rule, outside of that one rule, there's no other rule. So it should
Wow.
be so challenging to you that it intimidates you to even think about doing it.
Mm.
So that might be something like, I don't know, hiking maybe, I don't know, 20 miles. I don't know how, if that's too long, but hiking maybe some tall mountain. I'm not going to say Everest, but some big mountain in your area, or hiking some distance that really intimidates you with like 100 pounds on your back or something to that effect. That's really hard and challenging that you haven't done before, but it's far enough away that that your mind has to really wrap around what it is. And
Mm.
it's overcoming things like that's when you build courage. Like it doesn't just happen. It doesn't just show up.
Yeah.
The world is a reflection of what you become, but you have to make yourself do things in order to become something. You
Yeah.
can't just sit. I'm a big fan of reading books, but you can't just sit and read books.
Yes.
I'm a huge fan of reading books, but at some point you have to apply it
Yes.
to see if it actually works. And courage and confidence are those things that you have to also apply to see if they actually work.
So good. So good. You're amazing. And I just want to say that all the members of your gym were so lucky to have you. And it's so clear now as we're speaking today that there's no way you would have been able to reach the people that you reach, that you need to reach if you had still continued to run the gym. And I'm sure people there loved it, but I know now that you have a very, very powerful message that needs to be shared with the whole world. And I truly believe, Jerry, that you're doing that. And I'm so incredibly honored to have this conversation with you and just to continue to watch your growth too over time. It's really quite something. So I hope that you do continue to create things and send that message and spread it because so many of us need to hear it. And this is so incredibly valuable. Thank you.
I appreciate you saying that, Sherry. It means a lot. And I appreciate you allowing me to come here to spread the message.
So much heart. So I know we spoke a lot today, and I'm sure you've shared most of what you wanted to share, but just in case there was that one more thing that you wanted to share before we sign off, what would that be?
I was asked on a podcast, this is a great question. If you had one superpower, what would it be? My I told him my 15-year-old self would say it would be to see through walls, but I'm not 15 anymore, so I can't say that. So my superpower would be to give people the self-worth that they lack. You if you can start to believe in yourself and your capabilities and start to believe that you're worthy, forget about confidence for a second. Confidence is important. Don't get me wrong. Of course, we've talked a lot about that. But if you can start to understand that you're worthy of change and that you are worthy as a human being, no matter your current situation, no matter your current health, no matter your current income, no matter any of it, that you're worthy as a human being, that alone is one of the most important things that a person can start to build in themselves is self-worth.
So good. So good, Jerry. I love that. I love that we're ending with that. So powerful. Like everything else you shared. And if someone wanted to reach out to you, to learn more about you, to work with you, where could they go to do that?
Well, as we talked about, I have a podcast as well, which you have been on. I have a website for that. It is goodwolfproject.us. If you go there, I actually have a PDF for what I call the self-confidence cycle, where you can put in your name and email and you'll get that PDF. It's 4 steps that you can do either in a given moment, or you can sit down and it'll help you reflect on what may be holding you back and may be causing that self-confidence gap. So again, you can go to goodwolfproject.us and get that, or just find me on Instagram at Jerry Scarlato.
Amazing. We're going to add all of that in the show notes. Jerry, I love this conversation and I definitely want to connect with you again. I feel like we should do one of these at least once a year just to continue to share all the things, and it's been so fun to talk, so easy and just really, really beautiful. Thank you again so much for your time.
Appreciate you, Sherry.